Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to talk about some short form literature that I encountered recently that was pretty interesting. It is a short story about an unwinnable choice in a kingdom where a king puts everyone on public trial in an unusual way. I am referring to The Lady or the Tiger by Frank Stockton, which was published in 1884. For those who don't know, Frank Stockton was an American writer. He began as a wood engraver up until his father died, and then he started getting more stories published, including serving as an editor for a literary magazine for a short period of time. He was known for writing sort of short literature as well as fairy tales in some way, and I believe that you could attribute that kind of thinking to the story that I'm going to talk about today, because it's not so much a story as it is as it's meant to teach a lesson of some sort, much like how a fairy tale would go. And Frank Stockton garnered some acclaim for his work, including the idea that, like, the lady or the tiger is a phrase that we use to describe unwinnable situations. So at least some of his work has been sort of immortalized in our language. And the way that I found out about this specific short story is that it was mentioned in the Princess Bride. Goldman, like in one of his side tangents, goes on to talk about how a certain situation in the book is like The Lady or the Tiger, which I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go seek that out, and this is what I am doing today. So without further ado, let's talk about The Lady or the Tiger. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. And by read, I mean, of course, I'll do a summary. So The Lady or the Tiger focuses on a foreign kingdom that is being led by a brutal king who does not like when people speak out against him or rebel. He is wielding power pretty terribly, and as a result of this, he's created a public arena where usually the public arena is meant for fighting, but for him it's a symbol of justice. Everyone who garners the attention of the king and is also set to be on trial, what he'll do is he'll put them in the kingdom with two doors, or in the public arena with two doors. The first door leads to a tiger that will most likely eat the person who opened that door, and the other is a lady that is described as being the perfect match for this person who is on trial. And if they open that door, then a priest will show up and they'll get married. And the narrator notes that it doesn't matter if that person was already married and had a family. What only matters is that the king has put on some public spectacle, and the people are going to get that public spectacle. Unfortunately for the king, his daughter is rebelling against him, as young children tend to do, and the princess has found herself with a slave, or a youth, as it's mentioned in other versions of the story. I don't exactly know, but I'm going to use the word slave because that's the term that the version of my story had. And the princess wants to be with the slave wants to be with the princess, but the king does not like this, and so he has put the slave on trial and is going to force him to make this decision. And the king views this as win-win for him, because the slave will either be mauled to death, or the slave will end up with another maiden, and so the king doesn't have to worry about the slave potentially having his daughter. As the slave is sitting there making his choice, he turns back towards the princess, and nobody else can see this, but she is pointing in a certain direction, and the at that point, the slave makes his choice. He picks a certain door, but we do not find out what that choice was. Rather, the narrator starts waxing, philosophical about all of this. Like, did the princess choose the right, or give him the right choice? She was kind of in an unwinnable situation because either another maiden would have the man that she loved, or a tiger would kill the man that she loved. As the story ends, the narrator notes that what choice was made in here says a lot about human nature. In terms of analysis, there is a lot to think about with this story, given that it's kind of the basis of all the sort of unwinnable situations that we come across in literature in real life. That's exactly what Frank Stockton is trying to get us to think about, is unwinnable situations. Like, what happens when we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, another popular saying there. Like, for the slave in the story, for the young man, like, he does not benefit from either choice. The slave can choose the slave can choose one door, and that can be the tiger, and he dies. Not good for him. The slave can pick the other door, and he ends up with a maiden. Not necessarily the maiden might be his perfect match, but he was clearly in love with the princess, and that's not going to be a benefit to him. He's just going to be forced to marry somebody else. Not a very fun time. So for the slave, like, no matter what door he picks in this case, it's not going to be very helpful to him. And the same applies to the princess in this situation. She could guide him towards because she knows about this. Like, she could guide him to the tiger door, and that could kill him, and then she doesn't have her lover anymore. Or she could guide him towards the other door, which is the prince, or the fair maiden door, and the princess could be without the man that she loves, which she doesn't want, and she's kind of jealous about, because, as the narrator notes in the story, like, the princess maybe saw the maiden looking at her boyfriend before, and maybe also saw him looking at her. Maybe a fit of jealousy right there. But the princess does, like, there's a number of questions, like, what door does the princess give him? And no matter which door she picks, she's kind of doomed, because she doesn't get, she loses as well, no matter what door is picked. And so the question is, like, what door does the princess give? That's a big philosophical question at the heart of this, because does she pick the door that will lead to happiness for the slave, or does she pick the door that will lead to sadness for everybody, but will help her, like, not have to see her lover end up with another person? Those are good questions, like, to ask, and they reveal a lot about human beings as well, which I think is what Frank Stockton is trying to get us to think about. Like, in the face of seeing those we love end up with someone else, do we let that happen? And if we don't, does that mean that humanity is kind of doomed, because we can't make choices that are beneficial for other people, even if like, they don't benefit us at all? Like, are we only able to make good choices when there's a benefit for us? And if there's not, like, how do we change that, or something like that? And it's also interesting because either way, as the narrator notes, the king benefits in this story. Like, if the prince is mauled to death, or, like, if the slave is mauled to death, slave's gone. If the slave ends up with the maiden, slave is gone, because he has to marry this maiden, and he won't end up with the princess. So he can control the princess's life however much he wants now. Although the other parties in this story do stand to lose everything, and there's no win for them, there is a win for the king, but the king doesn't really get anything from either situation. It's just something that he loses. So again, everyone's going to lose something, even if the losing in one situation is a benefit. And then another thing that Stockton is talking about in the story is the corruption of power. It's a minor thing, but Stockton is talking about how the king is brutal to the people in this story. Like, he's kind of wielding his power in a negative way that doesn't stand to actually benefit anyone who's at the heart of the story. And so, like, one of the ideas that the king institutes is the arena, where already, like, the arena is a devastating place, because it's a place where people fight for the laughter and entertainment of the citizenry. But here, the arena is just spectacle for the king, because the person like who's going to be on trial, like the king usually doesn't pay attention to this stuff unless it's a particularly big name trial. So like he's only showing up when there's some interest to him, or when the general public cares enough, and even more so. The king the king doesn't actually seem to care about justice at all in this story, because as the narrator notes, with the slave situation, the king or the slave already noted that he loved the princess. Like he admitted his guilt in here. So if this was about an effort of figuring out who's guilty and who's innocent, you don't need to go into the arena, because the slave admitted as such. And so this shows that the king is more interested in the spectacle of it, of giving the people a show, maybe distracting from the fact that their lives are terrible. And so the king at hand is, a terrible person who's not really interested in justice and is merely interested in entertainment. But the public is also at fault here as well, because they're allowing this to happen. They're showing up to see someone either get mauled by a tiger or to get married in a fantastic, absurd type of wedding situation. And the public could speak out about this. They could decide not to show up, and this could just be on the king, or they could fight the king and decide that this is not what they want to happen in their society. But they're still showing up, and they're allowing all of this to take place. And that way, it kind of reminds me of stories that would come later, the ones that walk away from Omelas, whereas the people in that story, they allowed cruel stuff to happen because of how it was perceived that would benefit society in some way. And in the lottery, the people allowed the cruel deaths to happen because otherwise, this is just what they've always been doing, and if they don't do it, something bad might happen. Although they don't really know what that bad thing is. And in this story, the people allow this to happen because it's spectacle. So I think it's another interesting way to say why bad things in society happen. I don't think Stockton is trying to go that far, but there's an argument to be made that he's saying that a lot of times people allow bad stuff like this to happen because it's spectacle. We like seeing strange stuff go on, and we love being entertained by it. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Lady or the Tiger by Frank Stockton. I definitely recommend this to you out there, and I will put a link to it in the description. If you could, read it and then comment on my video here what you think about the story. I'd love to have a discussion with you about this. There's certainly a lot of philosophy that you can talk about, even if this is aimed at children. I think the sort of fairy tale nature, the sort of teaching nature of it, I think there's a lot worth pulling apart from this and thinking about. Otherwise, if you've read this before, or you simply want to comment, like, share, and subscribe so that other people can, other people can find out about this or this author if they don't already know about them. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and tigerish travels. Farewell.